You're real open to cues that the person gives you. Perhaps you walk through the grocery store, the flowers section, and maybe a comment from one of you, that's a nice bouquet or something. Would it hurt to ask, well, would you like something like that for Valentine's Day?
Valentine's Day is about showing love and affection for that special someone in your life. However, the expectation to make it a perfect Valentine's Day can create a lot of anxiety. A K-State Research and Extension Family Systems specialist says paying attention to cues from your Valentine will make it easier to choose the gift they like, make a reservation at their favorite restaurant, or know what movie they want to see. On today's Sound Living, using Valentine's Day to strengthen your relationship. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. Charlotte Shoup Olsen says that couples who've been together for a long time probably don't experience as much stress or anxiety as those who haven't been together very long because they've learned what the other person likes, wants, and appreciates. Charlotte, Valentine's Day is one of those days that actually has some expectations, and some of that is put on us from the outside, and some of it is really from inside.
Absolutely. It's a holiday that the whole nation recognizes, and the expectation of romance and treating a special person as part of the culture. It can help in some ways, but in other ways it cannot be as helpful, particularly if you match those cultural expectations that you think are out there.
There really is some stress, I find, associated with Valentine's Day.
It depends on the person, too, and what they have come to think that Valentine's is all about. And let's talk about in a couple relationship. Both persons may come to Valentine's Day with different expectations. And sometimes you're assuming what those expectations are. And sometimes those assumptions may not be right. For instance, one of you may think that the other one really expects a lavish recognition by flowers, chocolates, whatever, while that other person may not have that expectation. And when that happens, then the person who is giving may get the feeling that they're not being appreciated.
Or they may think that they've underperformed, in a sense.
That's right. So how do we deal with that when a person or two people are in a committed, loving relationship and want to recognize each other? Well, first of all, I think it depends on how long you've been together. If you're a relatively new couple, you're not going to know as much about that other person. In the research literature, one researcher calls it knowing the other's love maps. You just don't know all those fine-tuned little things that you would after you've been with a person for a long time. So how do you get to know those things about a person? You're very observant. You ask questions. Now, when it's right at Valentine's Day and you say, what do you want? That might not be sending the right signal. What you need to be doing over time is just being very alert to what you know that person wants or appreciates. And I'll give an example here. Perhaps you think you need to buy that 2 dozen red roses and so forth, and you're a couple that's been together for a while, and you've established a home together and family relationships, perhaps have a child or two, and you think those 2 dozen red roses, well, maybe you've had a rough time recently, and that will cure the problem. Well, that 2 dozen red roses may just really backfire because the other person receives them and knows that your joint bank account is pretty low. And here you've wasted money on 2 dozen red roses. And using another issue is using that as a way of making up for a disagreement at that particular time. Maybe more communication needs to go on rather than a extravagant gift like that. So you have to be aware and just pick up on cues from the person all the time, from the comments they say, from the conversation you have with each other.
You mentioned the length of the relationship. And that's really key because I think when we were talking about this interview to begin with, I told you how nervous and anxious I was the first few years we were married because I was trying to meet her expectations of what Valentine's was, or at least what I thought her expectations were for Valentine's Day. And now we kind of have that communication and that relationship to where I know I don't have to go out and buy the flowers because she doesn't like the fact that they don't last long anyway. Let's go out to dinner. Let's do something else. So really, I guess, kind of what you've learned through time, but also talking about what you want to do.
Absolutely. In family relationships, couple relationships, you always come down to communication and talking with each other, asking those questions in a way that it doesn't produce any defensiveness, conversations, and also just respectfully listening a lot. Oftentimes we talk about communication and we sort of underemphasize the importance of listening. So how do you listen? First of all, you're real open to cues that the person gives you. Perhaps you walk through the grocery store, the flowers section, and maybe a comment from one of you, that's a nice bouquet or something. You know, would it hurt to ask, well, would you like something like that for Valentine's Day? You're just picking up on a little cue that was given to you, or the person may not even realize it's a cue, but something that they noticed and made a comment about. And so you respond. You recognize they made that little comment, and maybe that can help you in the expectations the two of you will have between each other. Does that make sense?
It does make sense because I think that people do kind of drop hints as we get around certain holidays, and I think they sometimes do that to see if you're picking up on those cues.
It could be, and at other times, they may not even realize they're giving a cue. You know, when they see those flowers and they make a comment, they may not even recognize that's a cue. But if you pick up on that and check it out, then you may be more in line of that other person's expectations.
Sometimes my wife will call it, oh, you read my mind. You got me this just when I was thinking about it, or something like that. You know, from a guy who's trying to impress the wife, if you happen to hit on that one thing that she wasn't expecting that she gets, that can be nice too.
It can be very rewarding. And when you said that you read my mind, we have to work at being able to do that. We always have to be cautious in thinking we've read the other person's mind. In this instance, it really worked out nicely, but sometimes we think we read the other person's mind, and it's not correct. So how do you find out if you're correct in reading that other person's mind? You ask.
That's a good point, because if somebody doesn't like surprises, that's probably not the time to spring on them that, at 7 o'clock that, oh, by the way, we've got a reservation for 7:30.
If you've been picking up on the other person and their habits, their likes, their dislikes, you should know that a surprise, even with the best intent, may backfire if you know that's not the other person's liking.
If for some reason it does backfire, what can you do? How can you salvage this moment? Because you don't want to have the whole day be ruined by maybe one inadvertent thing that you did.
Well, apologies always can work. Very sincere apologies. Insincere apologies can be picked up on, or if you get defensive about it. Well, I thought this is what you wanted. It's going to go nowhere. There, you're becoming defensive, and what is defensiveness? It just goes in a circle and generates then defensiveness from the other person. So you stop right then, or you stop before you even come out with a defensive comment, and think about your communication to that other person of a sincere apology and taking it from there.
For a guy who's on the radio a lot, I don't always express myself well, and I found through the years that sometimes the card companies say things far better than I can. Is that still an option? Can we still give somebody a nice card that says how we feel, even though maybe they're not our words?
I would say yes, and the card companies would like that answer. Again, it comes back to the couple. If you're comfortable doing that and you know that it's most likely going to be appreciated, well, sure, most definitely do that. To me, that probably would be a pretty universal yes, that people don't mind getting a card.
And if you are talented and you can do that, do it from the heart, do it yourself. But if you're not, trust the folks at Hallmark, right? What are some other things that maybe we could look at in terms of cues, either positive or negative?
Well, that's an interesting question. When you're around the other person, of course, then we can go to technology and the connections through text messages and that sort of thing. I guess the first one is just don't ignore those cues. When someone says something to you, even though you might be busy or occupied at the time, first of all, that person isn't picking up on that cue from you that you're occupied. But even if you are, I heard you, but can I get back with you kind of thing. So that you're acknowledging that other person when they do want to turn toward you and share something. And if it isn't convenient, like I said, you ask to revisit it later. And it's just about being focused on that other person, but not hovering over that other person. Again, a balance, just the informalness of day-to-day interactions. Playfulness is a great way to have fun interactions where you can pick up on cues too, but just always being in tune to that other person.
Because we are couples who are trying to celebrate what is kind of a romantic holiday, by and large, I assume any gesture is going to be taken fairly well?
It depends on the pattern of that couple's relationship. If that couple does not have a pattern of, I'll put a value statement on it here, of good interactions, that there's a lot of tension between them, I'm not sure that the Valentine's holiday will make much of a dent in that. Patterns of communication that get established between two people carry through regardless of whatever holidays it is, and particularly Valentine's. So, okay, you might say, well, how can we improve those interactions? Well, that comes back to just being very, very tuned into your own communication. You can't change that other person. So just always being tuned in to how you communicate with that other person. And if you want to break more of a negative pattern of your interaction, you're going to have to change something yourself. And then you say, well, I did this and I still, but it takes more than one time for a pattern to get established. So it's going to take more than one time to a pattern to get broken. So you just keep up the hope, like showing appreciation. That is such a huge one that sometimes we forget about. And learning how that other person likes those signs of being appreciated. For instance, doing all the grocery shopping and getting home, driving into the garage and tired and all, and the other person comes out and says, can I help you? That's a sign of appreciation. And be sure and thank the other person. And the last thing I would like to share with is Valentine's Day, sometimes creating feelings among persons who aren't connected to another person. And that's tough because you walk in a store and all you see and so forth and so on. And so that's time for that person who would like to be connected but is not. It's hard to say what would be helpful, but perhaps getting a group of people together and going out to the movie or something like that might be a way of handling that day when the cultural expectation is you have someone special.
I suppose it could be especially difficult if you've just lost a loved one.
Absolutely. Oh, my goodness, that's really tough. And again, if you can think of your support system, whether it's family members, friends, coworkers, whatever, if you can find some people to spend that time with, maybe it will be a little easier.
That's K-State Research and Extension Family Systems Specialist Charlotte Shoup Olsen. She also has a publication, Couple Talk, Enhancing Your Relationship, which can be downloaded from the KSRE bookstore at www.bookstore.ksre.ksu.edu. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.